Hi, everybody. This is just another mid-week announcement to talk about the book we're reading, just like kind of a little mini lecture. We had some great discussion last week, or the other week anyways, about the form of the novel. We talked about, things like diction and the imagery, the lack of quotation marks, all the literary choices and the author's making in the form of the novel itself, which is a good way to start off. This week, I thought I'd interject and just say some things about some of the themes that are starting to develop in the novel, because we're starting to get into more of that side of it, right? In the first 60 or so pages that we read the other week, McCarthy is just basically setting up the world for us. We're being introduced to characters, introduced to their struggle going through the world, introduced to the language, all of that kind of stuff. He didn't do this in a very straightforward fashion. We still don't know where we are. We don't know our characters' names. All that kind of detail is unresolved, right? It's not given to us. It's more like Octavia Butler's Bloodchild, which we read a little while ago, where the reader is forced to put together clues to figure out some of the basic stuff of the world. Even then, like I said, we don't have all the answers. Maybe we won't get all the answers in the book, but we certainly don't get them in the first 60 pages where he's setting up these things. And in this week's section, that's pages 59 to 129, we're moving on from that, and our protagonists are starting to face some struggles and some adversaries in the world. In this section, those adversaries take the form of other people who are also surviving in this world, but who prey on their fellow human beings for food, right? We encounter a group of cannibals. There's that one really gruesome scene in the basement of the house where they find a number of people who are trapped, and they find one person who has stumps left for legs, and the stumps are cauterized. That's because the people who are keeping those humans are using them as livestock. They're eating them piece by piece, right? In a similar way, in the earlier scene when they encounter the gang with the truck, he shoots the one gang member who's threatening his son. And then they run. When they come back, all they do is all they find is a pile of his bones that look like they've been boiled. So when he shot that guy, the other people on the truck ate the body of that man. So these are cannibals we're dealing with, right? And that's an important thing to keep in mind. These are people who are literally preying on their own kind, on other humans. It's important because, also in this section of the book, 59 to 129, we're introduced to this very important theme of the good guys versus the bad guys, right? Which it sounds very simplistic, but remember, this is how the man in the book is teaching his son. This is the division he's using to instruct his son about how to be a moral person, right? How to act in this world. So it's a little kid's idea of this, but it's a very important theme for the rest of the book: good guy versus bad guy. Now, what I want you to do, just to make this a little more interactive, I want you to literally pause this video that you're watching, or quit reading if you're reading, or do both, quit reading and pause the video, and just jot down a couple notes. What makes a good guy? What's a good guy in this book? Right? We've had some clues. All these discussions we've had between the man and the boy, they're discussing what it means to be moral in this world, what it means to be a good guy. Okay? So literally, pause the video and do this. I'll give you a minute. Okay, so I hope you came up with some ideas. Here's a few things we've seen already, right? Just like what we were just talking about. Good guys don't eat people, right? Good guys are not cannibals. They don't eat people ever, even if they're starving. Good guys don't eat dogs, right? There's a scene in this section of the novel where they hear a dog in the distance, and the man thinks back to another time that they had a dog following them. And he was, I think it's implied in that earlier scene that he was thinking about trying to eat that dog, but the boy was definitely not into it. So they had a bit of a debate about that, but they don't eat dogs. They don't eat animals like that. I mean, they would eat animals, but they don't eat dogs, right? So we need to think about that. Good guys try to help each other, try to help other people. If you remember that scene in the previous section where they find the burned man along the side of the road, the boy definitely wants to help him. The man realizes there's nothing they can do for him, so they have to go on. But they do want to help him, right? And there's also, when they find the people in the basement of the house with the cannibals, they feel horrified, and I think they would want to help them, but they can't, right? And sometimes you can't help people even if you want. But they want to help other people. Good guys want to help. And also we've seen good guys don't give up, right? We have that scene with the flashback where he's thinking about the mother, right? His wife, the mother of the boy, and she decides to go kill herself rather than try to struggle on in this world with no future and no hope, right? But I'm not saying she's a bad guy, one of the bad guys of the book, but she's not in the good guy camp, okay? So I want you to keep thinking about this good guy, bad guy division as you read through the book, because it really is one of the kind of overarching themes of the book. How do you act in a world where there is no morality, where we can't be sure about moral truths? So the next question I want you to think about, and again, I'm going to ask you to pause the video after I ask these two questions, because I just want you to stop, take a moment, pause, and reflect on these two questions. They might sound a little, I don't know, extreme or silly or something, but this is put yourself in the position of our protagonist and ask yourself these questions. So first of all, do you agree with this definition of a good guy? That's what makes a good guy, a moral person. And then think about these two questions. So under what circumstances would you eat a dog or a pet? And let me just pause and say, there are cultures in the world where people do eat other animals. Dogs, cats are not as forbidden as they are in our culture. There are also cultures in the world where eating a cow, right, is seen as a bad thing, right? There are a lot of Hindu people who would never eat a cow and are probably horrified by the amount of beef that the average American eats. So I'm not trying to culture shame anybody, but this is The Road is an American book set in an American society where eating a dog is a big deal, right? So just a little caveat there. So under what circumstances would you eat a dog? If you were in the road, you were starving, your son's with you, would you eat that dog or would you not? Why not or why? And also, push it further, under what circumstances would you eat human? Again, so you're in this world of the road. There's nothing, you can't go down to the Arco and pick up a bag of chips and salsa and just, have a snack. There's, these two are starving. You have your son with you. You're starving to death. Let's imagine, you could even think, what if you came across the Burn Man, right, from that earlier scene, and you see him die right in front of you. So, he just died. He's dead. Would you eat that flesh if you had to, if you're starving to death? Or is there a line there? What makes that line? Why wouldn't you eat that? Okay, so literally take a minute, think about these things, right? Because these are important themes in the book. Okay, so part of the moral question of this book, and I don't have any answers for those last two questions. Those are up to you. If you feel comfortable chowing down on dog or human, and that's your justification. You need to think about where those limits are, because that's one of the moral questions of this book is what are those limits? Why do we have those limits, right? Remember, in the world of The Road, nobody's watching. This is a gray world where civilization is disappeared. There's nothing left. In America, if you were to kill a cat or dog, there would be negative consequences. But in The Road, there's nobody left to judge. So why don't they eat that dog? What's wrong with eating that dog? Nobody would know, right? And if they found out, nobody would care. They would probably think the man and boy, a lot of people in the world of The Road would probably think the man and boy are being ridiculous for not eating the dog, because that's calories you could take in, right? So why don't they eat the dog? Was that, and would you agree with them or not? So, one of the big moral questions of The Road is, if there's nobody watching, if there's no civilization, is it still wrong? And if it's not wrong anymore, what does that say about morality? Is morality dependent on judgment and on negative consequences, right? So this brings us to the other important theme of the book introduced in this section, and that's this, you might have noticed this phrase repeated a few times, carrying the fire, right? And what do you think that means? Because it stands out and it's going to become important throughout, right? So again, literally, take a minute, just sit back and reflect on it. Carrying the fire. Hopefully that stood out to you while you're reading, but if it didn't, now's a chance to reflect on it, right? What does the boy says that? We're carrying the fire. And the man says, yes, we're carrying the fire. This is something that they've been talking about before, implied, it's implied through the conversation. This is a thing they return to a lot. So what do you think that means? So hopefully you paused. That's why I paused. I point out a few things. First of all, fire has, many symbolic connections in myth and religion, especially Christian religion, with knowledge and morality, right? If you're familiar with Christianity, you'll know that there's a lot of light and dark imagery, right? There's a lot of hymns and passages that talk about the light of Jesus in a dark world. There's also, the Star of Bethlehem. There's just a lot of this imagery in Christianity. And of course, in myth, you might think about classic Greek myth. You have Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and brought it to humans. And that was kind of like knowledge, right? He was bringing knowledge and wisdom to humans in the form of fire. So it's this very symbolic action, right? And he suffered the consequences for that. But he brought, this knowledge and wisdom to humans in the form of fire, right? So it's fire is a very loaded symbol for us, right? So they're carrying the fire. I would also point out, that phrase, they always say carrying the fire. That's the phrase they use. And the verb carrying is interesting to use in that phrase, right? They don't say we have the fire, right? We've got the fire. They say we're carrying the fire, right? Carrying in a progressive form indicates an ongoing action, right? We're carrying. It's still happening. It's going on. It also seems to imply a journey, right? You don't carry something if you're just sitting around in your chair at home, right? You carry something if you're going somewhere. So there's this idea of like a journey and an ongoing action in this phrase. As well, I'd also ask you, have you ever carried fire? You ever had a torch from like a bonfire or something, or had like a lighter and you're trying to like take it somewhere to light something else? You have to shield it with your hands from the wind and from your movement, because you create wind when you move, right? So it's not easy to carry fire, right? Generally. In fact, it's usually a burden. And it is for our characters, for sure, to get up to hold this moral code, to carry this fire with them is definitely a burden, right? If they didn't carry the fire, if they weren't carrying the fire, would they eat that dog? So does it make it harder for them in this world to carry this fire? So it's a burden, but, it's the only way that, the only way they can carry this fire and start a new fire was by carrying this with them, right? Carrying this on from the old world into the new world. Okay, so that was just a couple of things I want to comment on. I'm going to leave the comment function open for this announcement below. So if you wanted to chime in and add your own take on any of these things, or if you want to chime in and tell me when you would eat dog or human, whether you see yourself as a good guy in the sense that they're talking about, that'd be great. So I'll just leave that open if anybody wants to chime in. Okay? So thank you very much. Have a good rest of your week. I guess it's Friday, so have a good weekend.